Death is a sad inevitability of life, and the unceasing march of time meant that 2018 took a fair few brilliant people down with it. From Hall of Fame legends, tough enough winners, and those who might never have grabbed the gold, but entertained millions upon millions nonetheless. This will not be a funny list, this won't be a crass list. This is a moment of respect for those who left us this year, and is our way of memorializing those who had such a great impact on the wrestling world. I'm Jules for WhatCulture.com, and this is Remembering Wrestling Names Who Died in 2018. Number 20, Mountain Fiji. Original gorgeous ladies of wrestling star Emily Mountain Fiji Dole passed away at the turn of the year, having suffered from various health complications for many years. She was 60 years old. One of the first names on the Glow roster at its inception, the untoppable Dole quickly marked herself out as the show's most beloved star, sharing many feuds opposite monster baddies Big Bad Mama and Matilda the Hun. Her popularity briefly parlayed into a television and film career, credits including the Pauly Shore vehicle Son-in-Law and CBS science fiction Hard Time on Planet Earth. As Glow was reaching its conclusion, Doyle was involved in an unsavory incident when the LA County Sheriff Department invaded her sister's home during a bridal shower. In echoes of the Rodney King scandal, 36 members of Dole's American Samoan family were beaten at police hands. Dole herself, aware of her celebrity, passively took her abuse all in front of a neighbor's video camera. 9 years later, the family won a legal settlement from the LACSD after suing on the grounds of racial discrimination. Towards the end of her life, Dole had been living in an assisted care facility. She died on January the 2nd. Number 19, Jonny Valliant. Former WWE wrestler and manager Jonny Valliant Sullivan was killed in early April after being struck by a truck in his home of Ross Township, PA. He was 71 years old. Sullivan was born on the 25th of November 1946 in Pittsburgh, growing up within close proximity to legendary wrestling champion Bruno Sammartino. He petitioned his neighbor for advice on how to crack into wrestling and soon formed a close friendship that opened the doors of the industry to him. 10 years after a successful stint in the then WWF during the early 70s, Sullivan, going under the moniker Jonny Valliant, returned to New York, now as a manager, having previously seconded for Hulk Hogan in the AWA. Valliant accompanied Brutus Beefcake at the inaugural WrestleMania, and he'd make further appearances at the next two events, offering support for the Dream Team. After his wrestling career wound down, Valliant turned his hands to acting, appearing on several episodes of The Sopranos and long-running serial Law & Order. He also performed a stand-up routine in New York City to some degree of acclaim. Number 18, Bruno Sammartino, 18th of April. One of the most instrumental figures in the history of the wrestling industry, Bruno Sammartino passed away on the 18th of April in Pittsburgh shortly after being hospitalized. He was 82 years old. Sammartino's importance to the business simply cannot be understated. Vince McMahon Sr.'s budding WWF was built around the Italian import, who held the company's top title for an astonishing 2,803 days. The real-life superhero sold out Madison Square Garden 187 times during his 8-year stint, helping lay the foundations for the Northeast Territory to become first a national and then a global juggernaut. Bruno was born on the 6th of October 1935 in Abruzzo, Italy, and his childhood was enough to rival any pro wrestling storyline. Throughout the 40s, Sammartino's family was forced to hide from the Nazis as the war came to a close, before he eventually migrated to Pittsburgh to join his father. The new emigre spoke not a word of English on his arrival, and his sickly disposition made him a frequent target of abuse in his first years in the state. These experiences molded the man. He took up weightlifting to bolster his physique, achieving so much success that he inevitably caught the eye of a wrestling promoter. As an ethnic strongman during his nascent spell in the business, Sammartino was a hero to thousands of Italian migrants in the country. As Vince Sr.'s definitive babyface, he was a hero to millions. When he finally dropped the WWF strap to Ivan Koloff at the MSG in 1971, members of the crowd broke down in tears of utter disbelief at the fall of their idol. Sammartino continued to wrestle until 1988, but became a forgotten figure within the WWE as a long-standing feud with Vince McMahon kept his legacy quiet on their programming until differences were finally resolved in 2013. He received a long overdue induction into the company's Hall of Fame to go alongside the other four he'd previously been honored by. Number 17, Big Bully Buzek, 8th of May. Nick Buzek, best remembered for his time in the WWE as the mustachioed blackguard Big Bully Buzek, passed away at the age of 63 on the 8th of May. Buzek had been suffering from cancer for a number of years, undergoing esophageal and brain surgery in 2016 in a bid to treat the illness. He entered hospice care shortly before his death, having been diagnosed with cerebrospinal fluid. A former high school amateur wrestler, Buzek was inspired to join the wrestling industry by his hero Bruno Sammartino, who he'd grown up watching on Pittsburgh's Studio Wrestling. He made his WWF bow in 1978, serving as enhancement talent in and around Pittsburgh for the next 2 years. After transferring to Atlanta to work for the city's PD, Buzek's role in the industry was honed thanks to a description from the announcer Joe Pedicino. The Georgia Championship Wrestling voice opined that blue-collar workers from the tri-state area all wore mustaches, hats, and smoked big cigars. "We just described a bully," he concluded. Pretty soon, Buzek was emanating that stereotype as the derby hat sporting handlebar mustache styling Big Bully. Buzek is best remembered for his 2-year stint in the WWF between 1989 and 1981, where, under the tutelage of Harvey Whippleman, he enjoyed a relatively high-profile feud alongside the likes of Sid Justice, Bret Hart, and the British Bulldog. After hanging up his hat, Buzek remained active within Atlanta's police department, whilst also serving as a bodyguard alongside Bill Demolition Axe Edie. Number 16. Vader, 18th of June. After being hospitalized for a month with pneumonia, Leon Vader White died on the 18th of June at the age of 63. He had been beset by health problems for many of the previous years. Throughout the 90s, Vader gained many admirers from the hardcore sector of the wrestling fandom for his immense credibility in a sea of cartoonish North American wrestling. His stiff series of matches in WCW with Sting, Ric Flair, and, in particular, Cactus Jack built Vader's reputation, but it was in Japan where he was immortalized. The immense Gaijin was an instant star in the Far East, excelling in both the AJPW and NJPW, as well as the country's numerous fringe shoot promotions. As legitimate though his offense was, Vader understood the pantomime of the business just as well, grasping each aspect with both of his considerable gloved hands. Though unanimously regarded as one of the industry's greatest ever big men, Vader was unable to crack the WWF, a league where wrestlers of his stature were usually guaranteed a success. In his later life, White aired regrets at refusing to change his name to appease Vince McMahon's whims, pointing it out as a key factor in his Stamford failure. His ultra-stiff style, much to the chagrin of the champ Shawn Michaels, also didn't help his cause. Despite suffering with multiple health issues after his top-level run ended, Vader continued to make sporadic independent appearances up until a year before his death. An inverse of the old adage that the greatest wrestlers are extensions of their real selves, Vader was widely regarded in the industry as a soft, generous man. His passing left a sizable hole in the industry. Number 15. Matt Cappotelli, 29th of June. In July 2017, Tough Enough 3 winner Matt Cappotelli was diagnosed with grade 4 glioblastoma multiforme, a type of brain cancer. On the 29th of June, his wife Lindsay posted to Facebook that Cappotelli had tragically passed away. He was just 38 years old. Cappotelli made his mark on the wrestling world when he triumphed as one of the winners of the 3rd season of the WWE's reality contest Tough Enough. He graduated alongside John Hennig, the future Johnny Nitro, earning a place in the company's development territory OVW. But was forced to retire just 2 years into his tenure after being diagnosed with a brain tumor. The illness was successfully treated, but sadly returned in 2017. Number 14. Rockin Rebel, 1st of July. Chuck Williams, more commonly known as Rockin Rebel, was found dead at an address in Westchester, PA on the morning of the 1st of July, alongside his wife. West Goshen Township PD declared the case as a murder-suicide. The pair's adult son discovered his parents lifeless in their living room when visiting the home. Gunshots had been heard earlier at the house, leading law enforcement officers to be dispatched at around 6 a.m. the previous day. Williams, born in 1966 in Westchester, was a veteran of the independent scene. Having been tutored by the Rock and Roll Express, he began his career in the Philadelphia-based Tri-State Wrestling Alliance. He left the company when it bankrupted in 1991, returning in 1993 as it resurfaced under the new guise of Eastern Championship Wrestling, the forerunner to ECW. After leaving ECW in 1995, Rebel pursued a journeyman career, appearing in dozens of promotions including 3PW, WXW, and CZW. At the time of his death, he was still infrequently active in the ring. Number 13. Masa Saito. Masa Saito, who twice won the WWF Tag Team titles with Mr. Fuji back in the early 80s, died on the 14th of July at the age of 76. He had been suffering from Parkinson's disease for the previous 18 years. Saito, a former freestyle wrestler who represented Japan in the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo, began his professional career in San Francisco, where he claimed NWA Tag Gold with Kenji Shibuya. The Tokyo-born grappler spent the next 13 years touring North America, picking up championships in Canada before migrating to the WWF in 1981. 3 years later, Saito's career was derailed when he and Ken Patera were jailed for assaulting a police officer. The story goes that an enraged Patera hurled a boulder through a McDonald's window after being refused service. When cops arrived at his hotel to investigate, Patera and his roommate Saito were uncooperative in the extreme, beating the officers up. The pair were imprisoned for 2 years as a result. Post-release, he embarked on a career in his homeland, memorably squaring off against Japanese legend Antonio Inoki in the AJWP. Their beef concluded with an infamous 2-hour-long island death match in 1987. A year prior to his Parkinson's diagnosis, Saito retired from wrestling following a loss to Scott Norton. Number 12. Nikolai Volkov, 29th of July. WWE Hall of Famer Nikolai Volkov passed away on the morning of the 29th of July, days after being released from a Maryland hospital where he had been treated for dehydration. He was 70 years of age. Volkov memorably portrayed an evil Bolshevik character across a career spanning just under 3 decades. Notably, he claimed WWE Tag Gold alongside fellow foreign menace the Iron Sheik at the first ever WrestleMania, defeating the US Express for the straps. After initially starting out at Stu Hart Stampede Wrestling, Volkov got his first big break in the industry under the guise of Beppo Mongol for Vince Sr.'s WWF. Paired with Gito Mongol, the duo captured the International Tag Team titles before he took a sabbatical from the company in 1971. He returned 3 years later, assuming Nikolai Volkov as his moniker to battle erstwhile babyface champ Bruno Sammartino. After a brief sojourn to Minnesota's AWA, Volkov made a second return to New York, this time with the hammer and sickle firmly emblazoned on his psyche. It was as this communist terror that Volkov earned his greatest recognition, prominently featuring at the first 3 WrestleManias. The end of the Cold War effectively killed the gimmick, as Volkov transitioned into a babyface role for the first time in his career. But there was one last heel run left in him, when he was brought up by Ted DiBiase as muscle for his $1995 million corporation. Volkov was inducted into WWE's Hall of Fame in 2005. Number 11. Brickhouse Brown, 29th of July. After several days of conflicting reports about his ailing health, Frederick Brickhouse Brown Seawright died on the 29th of July after a battle with prostate cancer. He was buried just over a week later on what would have been his 58th birthday. It was in Memphis where Seawright earned most of his prestige after a heated back and forth with territory top dog Jerry Lawler. He was also a prominent star in the USWA and the AWA, in addition to making a handful of enhancement appearances for the WWF in 1995. Seawright was diagnosed with cancer in April 2017. He subsequently lost 100 pounds and was forced into hospice care at the start of the year. After initial reports suggested he had died on the 20th of July proved bogus, Seawright passed away just 9 days later. Number 10. Brian Christopher, 29th of July. Former WWE Tag Team Champion Brian Grandmaster Sexay Christopher died in police custody on the 29th of July after reportedly hanging himself in his cell. He was just 46 years old. The son of Memphis wrestling legend Jerry Lawler, Brian Christopher was born Brian Lawler in 1972. Following in his father's footsteps, he spent a decade working in Memphis's USWA under the name Too Sexay, feuding with many of the territory's top stars, including the King himself, before making the switch to the WWE in 1997. At first drafted in to bolster the fledgling light heavyweight division, Christopher eventually found his feet pairing with Scott Too Hot Taylor as Too Much. The relationship between Christopher and commentator Jerry Lawler was a running inside gag, with the team mostly making up the numbers before a 1999 transformation thrust them unexpectedly into the spotlight. Adopting the names of Grandmaster Sexay and Scotty Too Hottie, the newly rechristened Too Cool became unexpectedly popular, thanks in part to the addition of the breakdancing super heavyweight Rikishi. Hitting the height of their popularity at the turn of the millennium, Too Cool found themselves in headline programs opposite Triple H and the likes of Edge and Christian. After his release, Christopher drifted around the independent scene, working in TNA for 2 years alongside other second-generation stars Eric Watts and David Flair. He made a few brief cameos in the WWE, notably in 2011 when he infamously came back to a rather muted reception, but was never handed a long-term run back in the company. Lawler endured a troubled personal life over the last few years. Just a week prior to his untimely passing, it was revealed that he had been arrested for a second time as a result of a DUI, following an incident last June in which he and a friend failed to pay a hotel bill. It was in jail where his life came to a tragic end. Number 9. Jim Neidhart, the 13th of August. On the 13th of August, Cauliflower Alley Club president Brian Blair announced that Jim the Anvil Neidhart had passed away in his home after suffering a head injury following a seizure. He was 63 years old. As a part of the Hart Foundation, Neidhart twice claimed tag gold in the WWF during a 7-year spell of duos dominance. Bret's emergence as a single star left his former partner somewhat rudderless. And after a failed attempt to revive the tandem alongside brother-in-law Owen, Neidhart drifted between Japan, WCW, and ECW before eventually returning to Stamford in 1994. After a forgettable stint as the one-note Who, a more substantial Hart Foundation was formed, propping up many of the company's best angles before Bret Hart's acrimonious departure following Survivor Series 97. After retiring, Neidhart had the pleasure of seeing his daughter Natalya help put women's wrestling on the map in the WWE. Number 8. Villanova Third, 21st of August. One of Mexican wrestling's most revered luchadors, Villanova Third died after suffering a cerebral infraction in late August. He was 66 years old. Alongside his brothers, the Masked family was subsequently promoted as the top draws of Ray Mendoza's newly founded Universal Wrestling Association throughout the mid-70s, with Villanova Third the main attraction. The Villanos dominated the UWA throughout the 80s, subsequently jumping ship to Antonio Penez AAA when the organization closed its doors in 1994. Even entering his 40s, Villanova Third's career showed no sign of winding down. In 2000, the poster boy of the UWA engaged in a spectacular feud with his CMLL equivalent Atlantis, culminating in an epic mask versus mask encounter. The match claimed the Wrestling Observer's coveted Match of the Year award and is widely regarded as one of the finest mask versus mask matches in Mexican wrestling history. Beset by injury and with his eyesight failing, he hung up his proverbial mask in 2015. Unfortunately, his final match, a 6-man with his brothers, taking place on the ill-fated Triplemania 23 show, was a disaster. 15 years after claiming the Observer's highest accolade, Villanova Third achieved the dubious distinction of earning its worst counterpart. It was a disappointingly unedifying end to a legendary career, but one which couldn't tarnish his 40-year legacy. Number 7. Aya Koyama. Japanese wrestling and MMA star Aya Koyama sadly lost her battle with stage 4 cancer in late August. She was just 45 years old. Koyama made her pro wrestling debut with Japanese women's promotion JD Star, before being scouted by big hitters AJW and Big Japan Pro Wrestling. Her career even took her as far as Mexico's CMLL before she decided to take a sabbatical from the business in 2001 to pursue an MMA ambition. A mixed record in the Octagon led Koyama back to the squared circle in 2005. During her second spell, she came into contact with future WWE star Asuka, adding her to a list of glittering opponents. Number 6. Dick Slater, the 18th of October. On the 18th of October, WWE released a short statement announcing that Dick Slater had passed away at the age of 67. No cause of death was given. Slater, born Richard Van Slater in Florida, was an industry veteran with over 3 decades in the business. A star of the Mid-South, Georgia, and Memphis territories in the 70s and 80s, Slater is best remembered for his partnership with Cowboy Bob Orton and bitter feud with WWE star Jake Roberts. Slater had a brief spell working for Vince McMahon before touring Japan ahead of his stint in WCW. A severe back injury forced him to hang up his boots in 1996. After retiring, Slater experienced a tumultuous personal life. He was arrested in 2003 for stabbing then-girlfriend Teresa Halbert multiple times. He pleaded that he was intoxicated by opiates at the time of the stabbing. A year later, he was sentenced to a year's house arrest and 2 years probation. Number 5. Jose Lothario, the 6th of November. Announced on the 6th of November that NWA Hall of Famer Jose Lothario had passed away at the age of 83. Jose is best remembered by modern fans as Shawn Michaels' on-screen manager during his ascent to the WWE Championship in 1996. Though he won a bevy of championships during his in-ring days, perhaps Lothario's most significant contribution to the industry was in passing on his knowledge to a plucky upstart from San Antonio called Michael Hickenbottom. In addition to teaching his apprentice how to hit those sweet kicks, Lothario also came up with a new name for his protege, Shawn Michaels. As Michaels began the pursuit of his boyhood dream prior to WrestleMania 12, Jose Lothario was by his side. The Mexican, effectively brought in to help the naturally unsympathetic Michaels win over the crowd during his big babyface run, stayed with HBK until the Royal Rumble 1997. Number 4, Larry Matuszak. He got his break as an announcer for the flagship show Wrestling at the Chase, and worked closely with members inside the business until he later retired in 1982. An attempt to start his own promotion based around Bruiser Brody succumbed to the whims of fate. Vince McMahon was stepping up his national expansion, and soon Larry found himself under his thumb. For a period, he operated as McMahon's rep in St. Louis, though struggled to match the success of Wrestling at the Chase. He's probably best known amongst modern fans for his writings on the industry, most notably Brody, which details the life and tragic death of Frank Bruiser Brody Goodish. Number 3, Dynamite Kid, 5th of December. Former WWE Tag Team Champion and pro wrestling innovator Tommy Dynamite Kid Billington passed away on the 5th of December, his 60th birthday. Billington's big break came when he appeared on World of Sport at the age of just 18. He quickly rose up the ranks before migrating to Stu Hart Stampede Wrestling. It was there that he began to make real waves in the business through his matches with fellow promising rookie Bret Hart. It was also in Calgary where he first picked up his ultimately destructive drug habit. Touted by Bret Hart as pound for pound the greatest wrestler who ever lived, Billington made his biggest impact on the business with his series of ultra-innovative matches against Tiger Mask during his first spell in New Japan. It was during this time that he would take up the diving headbutt, the move that would make him famous but would ultimately destroy his life. In the WWF, he joined his cousin Davey Boy Smith and formed one of the promotion's finest ever tag teams, the British Bulldogs. However, behind the scene, Billington was an infamously prickly person to deal with. It eventually got the better of him, resulting in his whole set of teeth hitting the floor thanks to winding up another wrestler behind the stage. The incident was the start of his exit from the company. After leaving the WWF, the Bulldogs returned to Canada, where they mentored another promising newcomer by the name of Chris Benoit. Davey Boy's sudden WWF return and the brief, glorious push that followed left Billington rudderless and embittered. In 1992, his former partner headlined Wembley Stadium. Meanwhile, Billington had announced his retirement a year earlier and was trapped in a devastating cycle of destruction, with his patented high-impact style enabling his spiraling drug problems. An LSD binge during an All-Japan tour nearly killed him twice in the same day. His final match was a heartbreaking affair. Completely dilapidated after years of abuse, an emaciated Billington struggled through a contest alongside Dos Caras and Kunaiki Kobayashi. He suffered a seizure on the way home. His mounting leg injuries eventually forced him into a wheelchair, and he became dependent upon round-the-clock care from his second wife, Dot. His later life was beset by heart problems, and in 2013 he suffered a stroke. Despite being one of the most innovative wrestlers of all time and a significant cog in the golden era, Billington has yet to become inducted into the WWE's Hall of Fame. Number 2, Larry Hennig, 6th of December. Larry the Axe Hennig, father of Kurt Mr. Perfect Hennig, and grandfather of Joe Curtis Axel Hennig, died of kidney failure on the 6th of December. He was 82 years old. Hennig made a name for himself within the wrestling industry during his time in the AWA, where he formed a successful partnership with Harley Race. The pair became the youngest ever AWA tag champions when they bested Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher for the straps in January 1965. After refusing treatment for a serious knee injury in 1967, Hennig was forced to spend several months on the sidelines. The industry opened the door for partner Race to go on his own path, with Hennig diverted to Florida and Minneapolis upon his return. Hennig's son Kurt became a major star in the industry during the mid-80s and early 90s under the Mr. Perfect gimmick. Kurt's own son Joe followed his family footsteps, drawing his ring name Curtis Axel from both his father and grandfather. Joe is one of 28 grandchildren who survive Hennig. And number 1, Bill Fralick, 14th of December. Bill Fralick, a 4-time NFL Pro Bowl winner and a competitor in WrestleMania 2's 20-man WWF vs. NFL Battle Royal, died on the 14th of December following a battle with cancer. He was 56 years old. Fralick enjoyed a glittering career on the gridiron, becoming a 3-time first-time All-American during his college days before excelling at the Atlanta Falcons after turning professional, where he picked up the 1986 and 1987 All-Pro accolade. At the peak of his prowess, Fralick joined 9 other NFL stars at the Rosemont Horizon season for the Chicago leg of WrestleMania 2 as part of the WWF vs. NFL Battle Royale. The bout was ultimately won by Andre the Giant. Fralick returned to the company 7 years later amidst a throng of hopefuls looking to body slam Yokozuna on the USS Intrepid Stars and Stripes Challenge. The timing of Fralick's return was somewhat interesting. In 1989, he had strongly testified against the rampant steroid abuse in professional football, advocating a more rigorous testing procedure. When he was invited to try his hand upending WWF's champ Yokozuna, the wounds of the company's own steroid trial were still very much open. After retiring from action, Fralick worked as a color commentator whilst also running his own insurance service.